Hello, Nate here with the Volunteer Tech Vlog on the Live Sound 101 YouTube channel. Thanks for clicking over. Thanks for subscribing and liking. And this will be a media report for October 2nd, 2016. And I'm just going to read through some stuff on my little note, my little scratch pad, my little memo here. And then I'll get to driving and chat about how things went today. So we had, during rehearsal, we hit a max dB-SPL A-weighted slow, as measured from the back of the room, of 87.8. And then during the 8 a.m. it was 89.5 as the max, and then during 10:45 it was 89.4. So dB-SPL A-weighted slow, and we measure from a fixed position on the back wall. So that's just to kind of keep things in check, make sure we're not way too loud one particular week. I'm also starting to track temperature. So the amp closet, when I came in, said it was the thermometer said 53, which I think is that's pretty low. I question the accuracy of that. And the control room was 69 degrees, which that could have been true. So 53 and 69, and then by the end, after about 5-6 hours later, the amp closet went from 53 to 80. And then the control room went from 69 to like 72. So low 70s. So that's the temperature. So you do see how much hotter it gets, even with the exhaust fan running in the amp closet. Oh, interesting resource I learned from Seth, which is random, but Bible Hub, in case you want to look up things in Greek and Hebrew to like dive into their original meaning. It's an interesting resource I hadn't seen yet. I've seen some other resources online, but the Bible Hub actually looks like it's pretty good in terms of breaking down the words and the etymology and where it came from. Mental note here. So the Monoprice switch appears to be failing. So this is our stereo switch that handles all our left and right stereo playback. We put all our program sources into this switch, and then we pick one of the four and route that to our mixer, essentially, to save on inputs, so we don't have to burn 4 inputs for going into the system. And it appears as though it's failing. So the symptoms are very low levels. The levels lack bass, and there's a lot of noise. So it seems like something's failing in that switch. And on top of that, our Behringer Unit D, so the 4th Behringer, this is one that we just replaced recently. It seems like we're always replacing a Behringer. There's always a Behringer that's failing. And I'm starting to really get tired of it, to be honest with you. I just want something to last for a couple, more than a couple years. And the lifespan of these things just seems to be ridiculous. After we finally we've replaced all 4 of the ADA8000s, and now we have all ADA8200s, 2 of which are brand new, and the other 2 are like 2 years old. And now we've got, so in Unit D, channel input 6 is failing. It won't accept an input, and the LED that indicates signal coming in is always on, and there's always noise on that channel. It's just, there's nothing, even when there's nothing plugged into it. I power cycled it. I think something in that preamp is actually failing. Maybe something got shorted, needs to be resoldered. I don't know, but that input 6 is no longer good. So now instead of a 32 channel system, we've got 31 channel systems. We have to shuffle things around, and it's not good. So that would be channel 20, what did I say? So it's physical input 6 on the Behringer Unit D, which corresponds to virtual input 30 in software audio console. So we got to work around that. I labeled it as bad. I labeled the Monoprice switch as bad. So we're right now we're not using a switch, and I just have the jukebox PC hooked up directly to stereo left and right playback. Cool song by Bryan and Katie Torwalt. So this came up in Spotify. I had never heard it before. It's called Let There Be Light, and I thought it sounded like a pretty interesting tune. I don't know when it was released or anything about it, but I want to look up that tune. So note to myself to look up that song. And I want to talk a little bit about feedback. And with that, let's just start driving right now. So feedback is something that should never happen. And I really want to make a whole separate video about feedback. I think I'll probably make a video about feedback in the near future. But for today, we did have I guess what I would call a minor feedback incident, and I was behind the controls, so I am fully to blame for it. Now I was able to stop it before it really, turned into a bad situation. But feedback. So I had the wrong channel. I had the wrong fader selected, and I was turning up, and I was focusing on multiple things at the same time. And by the time I realized I was turning up the wrong fader, I started to hear like feedback kind of starting to well up. I'm like, uh-oh, what is going on? And I had been turning up the front of house master by mistake. So that's not good. I just like completely cranked the master fader like all the way up. Because I wasn't fully dialed in, paying attention there. And luckily I caught it. I started to hear the swell like starting to build up. I'm like, uh-oh. And I just muted the main mix real quick. And that stopped everything. And of course, this was right when the service was about to start. So picture this, I literally click mute on everything to stop the feedback until I can, figure out what it actually was. And I realized it was the main fader, so I pulled the main fader back down. And then I forgot where the main fader was. I was like, oh crap, because I turned it up inadvertently. So I'm like, I had main fader running at 0, or did I have it like -4, or where was it? And usually we run we run the front of house master at like -4.5 dB. It's not quite at 0, just a little, just to give it's all relative, but try to get as close to 0 as possible, just to maintain like a logical gain structure and everything. But so as soon as that little event happened, that also was like right when the pastor started speaking for the call to worship. So I just hit mute, killed everything, stopped the feedback, and split second later, cue the pastor. He starts talking, doing the call to worship, and of course his mic isn't on at that point because I just muted everything, because that was just like the quickest way to make whatever was about to feedback stop feeding back. And so it was a little bit, first service went fine. Second service, and then to me that was a big event. So I'm going to put that down in the calendar as like the date of the last incident, the last feedback incident. You know how like you work in a factory, you've got like days since the last injury or days since the last accident if you're, somebody gets hurt on the job or whatever, because you're trying to promote a safe work environment and safety first and everything. I feel like we need to put up like days since the last feedback incident and try to like, oh yeah, that was like 5 years ago. Like, that's kind of like the point you want to be at. So now I talked to people that were in the service and I said, oh man, did you hear that? Like, sorry about that. And they're like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, that like little like feedback build up that almost happened. They're like, oh, I didn't even hear anything. So I get, I'm probably being a little bit overly critical, but I just know how close we were to a really bad situation where everybody's plugging their ears and looking back at the sound guy like, hey, what the heck are you doing up there? We didn't quite get to that point, luckily, but I know how close we were to that point because I was the one that screwed up. Yeah, mark today's date, October 2nd, 2016, last feedback incident. I'm embarrassed to say it, but it is true. It is true. This is the real world of doing live sound. You got to deal with these things. So, and it was operator error on my part, as I mentioned. Other than that, things went pretty smoothly. Other than the gremlins in the system that just don't seem to go away with Behringer. Losing one of our mic inputs, like this is not a similar problem that we had before with like time code and word clock error. That was a different thing that was affecting like channels, like banks of channels, like 8 channel groups at a time, or even across all channels. We were having crazy word clock errors, and we got that straightened away. And then now channel 30 goes down, and I'm just like, man, can't catch a break. And on top of that, this little analog audio switch, it's like an IR controlled Monoprice switch. It's actually a component video and analog audio switch, and we just use it for the audio switch because it was like the cheapest way to save us some inputs. But we've probably had that thing for like, geez, 10 or 15 years. I mean, man, we've had that thing for a while, so it's definitely run its course. I mean, those things, electronics like that don't last forever. So I'm not even disappointed that the Monoprice thing seems to be failing, because that thing's old, you know what I mean? But we had essentially we had two things fail this morning, and the service went off without a hitch, you know, other than me being dumb and turning up the master front of house fader by mistake. Oh well, that happens. Bass palm. So yeah, so I updated the default mix file because channel 30 is failing. I switched everything over so that playback left and right are now channels 31 and 32 instead of 30 and 31, which logically makes more sense to me. Oh. My phone just fell down. Oh. No, I did not get into a car accident. My phone fell off the mount while I was driving, that's all. So I got this little mount right there from iAudi. I think it broke the first week. It broke the first week I bought it, and I doctored it up with these pads here, and you know, it kind of works until it doesn't. So yeah, I wonder if I go back and watch this video if it looks like I got into a car accident. But anyway, that's enough for today. My name's Nate. This is the Volunteer Tech Vlog, and I'll see you in the next video.